The following is Howard Thurman's third lecture at the Disciplines of Christ retreat. It was held Saturday, July 24th at 8 p.m. in Santa Barbara, 1971.
Behold, I will lay me a hold on the greatness of God. It is so very good, our Father, to lay bare before Thee all of the subtleties and the obvious things in our lives. There is so much we do not understand. So much that brings distraught to the spirit, confusion to the mind, and great ache to the heart. We do not know what to say to Thee. Out of Thy long experience with all the generations of Thy children, out of Thy great brooding heart, grace us with what we need in order that in the things that we think, in the things that we feel, in the things that we do, we shall not shame Thee, O God. O love of God, love of God. Life does not grow more simple with the passing years, but its deeper needs are unchanging. The secret of peace is not to be sought at the end of the road, but in the spirit in which we journey. It is to be sought in the consciousness of the sustaining love of a God who is committed to a real participation in all our strife, who does not release us from the battle, but who shares the fight, who does not set us free from the possibility of pain and tears, but who feels the hurt of our wounds the salt bitterness of our sorrow, who spends himself not only with us but for us, and in the travel of redemptive passion anticipates the victories of the Spirit. We are never to forget that we are all so tied up in one bundle that peace and reconciliations in which others are not involved are quite impossible. The note of service must be deepened, and in our care for those who lie wounded or broken along the road, we shall forget our wounds and our own wearinesses. So conceived, so reinforced, life is never impossible, but does indeed become an adventure whose greatness is its own best justification, and whose difficulties may become for the faithful and discerning but stairs of ascent to radiant and triumphant regions. And then this, from the Bernard Shaw's play, Androcles and the Lion. The captain says to Lavinia, "What you are facing is certain death. You have nothing left now but your faith and this craze of yours, this Christianity. Are your Christian fairy stories any truer than our stories about Jupiter and Diana?" Lavinia, "A man cannot die for a story and a dream. None of us believe the dreams and stories more devoutly than Spinball. But he could not face the great reality. What he would have called my faith has been oozing away minute by minute, whilst I have been sitting here with reality becoming more and more real, with stories and dreams fading away into nothing." "Then," said the captain, "are you then going to die for nothing?" Yes, that is the wonderful thing. It is since all the stories and dreams have gone that I have now no doubt that that I must die for something greater than dreams and greater than stories. But for what, I don't know. If it were for anything small enough to know, it would be too small to die for. I think I am going to die for God. Nothing else is really enough to die for." "What is God?" said the captain. "Ah, when we know that, Captain, we shall be gods ourselves." And two other things. "I think I see you somewhat, Galilean." Have I then seen God, the master of the hand? Is this the music in the score? Then verily does God appear like unto pity, pursuing a wanderer into far mountains. He is as broad shoulders passing upbearingly under the lost. As a quickening benevolence is he, like sun and rain falling upon the evil and the good. He is as the mystery of growing grain, as unpredictable as wind is God, yet is he as present as holiness and a prayer, winsome as beauty in a lily, as innocence in a child, sure as a strengthening in Gethsemane. Terrible, too, as a rock that breaks and brings to dust what it descends upon. Who collides with justice or truth collides with God, though his tread is muffled as the spreading ferment in dough, yet with his foot he trips the devil and brings him falling as lightning from heaven. Fruit seeker is God, pruning the stems for better bearing. Banquet spreader is God, summoning all to his bounty. Father of love is he, stricken for lost sons. I am musing on you, Galilean. These are your words. You make God a buried treasure to be ardently digged for, yes? Though a man must sell all else that he has that he may find. You make this finding the joy of the world. You make God the safeguard of sanity and the corrector of balance in a crazed and tilted place. Though all others forsake you, your Father remains and your world is full. He is the Spirit of eternal life. You speak with him in secret closets. You walk with him on starry trysts. You see him in the heart that grieves for its sin and in the breath of goodness that finds the spark of virtue in the smoke and fans it to a flame. Such was your God, Galilean, and for him you were ready to die. Even in dying, you still believe that had you preferred your life and lost this God, you should have lost your life and lost the living soul from your rich world and remained poor and unprofited, though all the kingdoms of the world had been added to you. And now one more, and then we'll go to work. To him that waits, all things reveal themselves, provided that he has the courage not to deny in the darkness what he has seen in the light. Waiting is a window opening on many landscapes. For some, waiting means the cessation of all activity when energy is gone and exhaustion is all that the heart can manage. It is the long, slow panting of the spirit. There is no will to will. There is no hope, but not hopelessness. There is no sense of anticipation or even awareness of a loss of hope. Perhaps even the memory of function itself has faded. There is now and before, there is no after. For some, waiting is a time of intense preparation for the next leg of the journey. Here at last comes a moment when forces can be realigned and a new attack upon an old problem can be set in order. Or it may be a time of reassessment of all plans and of checking past failures against present insight. It may be the moment of the long look ahead when the landscape stretches far in many directions, and the chance to select one's way among many choices cannot be denied. For some, waiting is a sense of disaster of the soul. It is what Francis Thompson suggests in the line, "Naked I wait thy love's uplifted stroke." The last hiding place has been abandoned because even the idea of escape is without meaning. Here is no fear, no panic, only the sheer excruciation of utter disaster. It is a kind of emotional blackout in the final moment before the crash. It is the passage through the zone of treacherous quiet. For many, waiting is something more than all this. It is the experience of recovering balance when catapulted from one's place. It is the quiet forming of a pattern of recollection in which there is called into focus the fragmentary values from myriad encounters of many kinds in a lifetime of living. It is to watch a gathering darkness until all light is swallowed up completely without the power to interfere or bring a halt. Then, to continue one's journey in the darkness with one's footsteps guided by the illumination of remembered radiance. This is to know courage of a peculiar kind, the courage to demand that light continue to be light even in the darkness. All that a man has is his life. All that you have is your life. An understanding and the acceptance of this fact is the heart of commitment. Now to pick up where we left off, approximately. Once the individual has made the nerve center of his consent over to God, yielded it to God, then things begin to happen. It is very difficult to do this. For it meaning to do this, means to give up the initiative over your own life. Once this happens, a man is not his own. And we spend a lifetime trying to carve out our own place. The journey that each of us has taken in an effort finally to be able to say with reference to something, I did it. I think that's one of the reasons why we keep alive the George Washington cherry tree myth. It's a gentle reminder. And some of us lived throughout our lives without ever being able to affirm this. And to achieve it is no ordinary feat, no ordinary achievement, to be redundant. And now commitment insists, you see, that the very essence of what is involved in the achievement of this sense of inner authority, that this must be yielded. And despite all of the things we say and all of the warm feelings that we may have and the reverential moods that sweep our spirits at times, there's something back in our minds and hearts moving around like a rumor that even God cannot be trusted with the power of veto and certification over our private lives. Because he just might take a chance with my life that I do not have in mind. So if I yield, I want always to be able to whisper in his ear or nudge him on the elbow and say, this is my life you're dealing with. In Jane Steger's book that I've been reading from, Leaves from a Secret Journal, she has a very marvelous section in which she wrestles with this problem in her own private religious life. And there came a time when at last she yielded the nerve center of her consent and waited. And God told her, clean out your bureau drawers and keep them clean. And she discovered that when she did this and kept them that way, her whole life was transformed. She didn't know this. I yield it, and I snatch it back. I yield it, and I snatch it back. As in Augustine's famous prayer that's quoted out of the context, and I'm doing it again. God, make me a pure man, but not yet. I have unfinished business. Now, therefore, you see, I am always yielding the nerve center of my consent. I do not ever finish it, because all the time I am making the most radical discoveries about vast reaches of my own life that haven't heard about it. Haven't heard about it. So that it is important to remember in our thinking about commitment in the light of the theme that the work is not over when I yield, when I say yes. Even saying yes with all of my passionate endeavor, because I am such a complex person. You are very complex. And even after we have made the central commitment. We must carry the word to the backwoods in our lives, where all communication has been down for a long time. And when I run into a new experience of some sort, or deepen my relationship with another human being, or encounter some of the raw edges of the very impersonal aspects of life by which I'm surrounded, I discover things in me that I didn't know were there until I hit this situation. And to my amazement, I find something turning up in me, asking for an audience. And I didn't even know I had it. And this has to be done over and over again. I must, how to say this? I must make the opening larger and larger so that there will be enough of creative uprush of the Spirit of the living God through the opening of my yielding, that it floods more and more the barren places of my life. There's a doggerel, it's hardly a poem, and I can't quote it, but I can describe it. About a dachshund dog, you know, those long sausage dogs. He met a man, and he was barking furiously, eyes flashing, ears up, hackles rising, for the attack, while his tail was just wagging in a very friendly way, because his tail just then was registering a good emotion he had 2 weeks before. Now this is what I'm saying. When we are stripped of all pretensions, and when we are reduced to the literal substance of the self, it's a lifetime journey for the vote to be inclusive. A lifetime journey. So I cannot understand commitment to God separated from a life of prayer. Well, that's enough of that. Now, part 2. My behavior has a very direct bearing on the way in which I desensitize or quarantine, that's better, quarantine the yielding of my heart, as we say, but what I'm saying, the nerve center of my consent to God. attitudes are very important. And this may sound very much like a Sunday school discussion at this point, but be that as it may. If I, in the way I live, in the details of my living, if I act in violation of what is the clear insight derived from my inner commitment, a very interesting thing begins to happen to me. My sense of commitment becomes increasingly remote. Let's just put a window there so you see exactly what's in my mind. When I was a boy, my mother and I had an agreement, and that was that I would not shoot marbles for keeps. It was mutual assent. The whole thing was above board and full of cooperation. I had two sisters who found always rather unusual uses for my marbles, and every time I went to my cigar box in which I kept my marbles, most of the time it was empty, and I don't know what they did with them, but they did something with them. And then one day when I needed marbles and I didn't have any, and then I remembered a certain boy in my town, and there's one in every town, at least one, whose parents are pretty well established. And they're able to provide him with all of the tools for enjoying himself, but he doesn't have many skills. He always has a ball and a bat and mitt, but he can't play ball very well. So he gets the chance to play ball by letting the other boys use his utensils or his tools or his equipment. And the same with marbles. Now, this particular boy, every day at noon, came down past the corner of the street on which I lived, going to to take his father's lunch to the ice house. His father was a stationary engineer there, and so I walked out of the yard without any announcement and waited for him up on the corner. And when he came back from the ice house, I said, Piers, would you like to play marbles? And he said, oh, yes, Howard. And I said, well, I don't have any, but I'll have to borrow some from you. So I borrowed some marbles from him, and we played marbles for keeps. And then when I had quite a nice collection, which happened to be all that he had, and then I went home. And when my mother heard my footsteps on the back porch, she called me, and time stood still. And then great was my relief when she only wanted me to do an errand. Every time I looked at her, however, she was looking at me. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, always those eyes. And finally, I couldn't stand this. And I went to her to tell her the whole thing. And she was hearing about it for the first time. This is a very subtle thing. The way in which the light of God to mix the figure generated in the very core of one's being as the light yields, the way in which this light is dimmed, eclipsed, is cast over by my doing what deep within me I recognize as being against the light. It's so commonplace and yet so perilous. If a man calls a good thing bad, the Master says, the time will come when he is unable longer to discriminate. I referred this morning, or one time since I've been here, to the account in which the Master's family said that he should be excused because he was a little off. But when the official representatives of his synagogues or the temple heard this, they said, he's all right as to his mind, but he is full of the devil. And it is by the power of the devil that he casts out devils. You remember the incident? And Jesus said, you do not talk as men who are very wise, very smart. A house divided against itself cannot stand. If you say that I am casting out devils by the power of the devil, you will commit what? The sin unpardonable. You will sin against the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of truth. For it means that if you do this, you will be unable to discriminate. You see, everybody is born as a gift of personality, with a sense of value. This is the context, the value context in which we live and think. Now, when there is this spiritual regeneration of which I'm speaking, this places into this what I will call valuational consciousness a new and fresh and creative dimension. And more of my life must be brought under the influence, the judgment, the domination, the control of this central thing. It is a familiar thing in the literature, in the thinking of people who are concerned about the behavior of human beings in the light of some central, overwhelming commitment. You remember in Macbeth? It is there, just a case in point. Macbeth had the idea that he was going to be a man of destiny. As a matter of fact, the witches told him so. And they convinced him, and then he convinced Lady Macbeth. And together they swam across Scotland in seas of blood, tying laurels on their brows with other people's lives and other people's heartstrings, until at last Macbeth was the first man of the land, and Lady Macbeth was the first lady. And one by one their friends disappeared were liquidated, their enemies multiplied, and Lady Macbeth became diseased as to her mind, you remember? Walking in her sleep, always trying to wash blood from her hands that was not on her hands. It was the color of her soul. And then at a critical moment in his life, the word comes to Macbeth saying, your wife is dead. And you remember what he said? She should have died hereafter. There would have been a time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in the petty pace from day to day down to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools their way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Why was life a tale told by a fool having no meaning? Because at this central core, where all of his values lived or died, he had disintegrated. When I violate my commitment, with all of the extenuating circumstances, I begin to imperil my soul. Even when I think that the extenuating circumstance will justify it, my commitment doesn't know anything about an extenuating circumstance. Only I know it. And then I bring God in to help me. You remember in the old part of the book, when this king, the heathen king, I don't like to use that word, but when that king had his right-hand man who was converted to the God of Israel, and he was the king's right-hand man. He now had the commitment. The king did not have the commitment. His duties as the right-hand man of the king meant that he must go with the king into the house of Rimmon and bow before the altar. And he prays to God, when I go into the house of Rimmon, and the king is leaning on my arm, and he bows before the altar of his heathen god, and I must bow with him. Oh, Jehovah, I hope you'll understand. Now, it isn't enough. This is what I'm trying to say. It isn't enough merely to keep my commitment current. by prayer, by quiet, by meditation,